What's up guys, welcome back to another video. Last week you might have seen that I dropped the preview to this full haircut tutorial. So today I've got Will in the chair and he has quite long hair as you can see, and what we're going to do is essentially just give him a little bit of a tidy up, nothing drastic. So we're starting off by just sectioning the hair, making sure that the sides are clearly defined to the top. So you notice the hair's wet, it makes it a lot easier to section the hair when it's wet. I've also got some clips, you don't need these but you can get them from Amazon pretty easily. So as I said, I've sectioned the top away from the sides as well as then making a V at the back. What I then do is start off on the sides, so I'm halfway round the back of the head at this point, but what you want to do is something called cross graduation. Like most of the barbering terminology, this is probably over-engineered, so what you want to do for this is essentially make a diagonal line as I have here, and then pull the hair straight down in the direction that it wants to travel. What you then do is pick up the hair, pulling downwards to make sure you keep the length, and then cut off the exact amount that you want. So I'm just taking off 1 centimetre here or even less. Another key point to this is just making sure that you're following the head shape. If you weren't to follow the head around as I'm doing here, you would end up with quite long hair at the back. If your client wants this, then that's absolutely fine, but make sure you check just before. Following this cross graduation and staying on the same side, I am then just going over my work and connecting the very top of the sides into what I've just cut. Having done the cross graduation all the way around the head as well as all the way down the head on that side, I'm then just going over my work, just adding the final touches, making sure I'm happy with it. I'd also always recommend going over your work just in case. So you can see here that the technique is just to slide the scissors in, pick up the hair a few times, making sure you've got what you want, and then just trim off the ends. Following the checks that I've done on that side, I then move to cross graduation on this side. I actually find this side a little bit easier because I'm right-handed. You can see the natural motion. It's a lot easier, it's a lot less draining on your hand, and your hand isn't in such an awkward position. The top tip here is also using your thumb to hold the comb while you're making the cut. This is a nice easy position and also allows you to just pick up the comb really quickly afterwards and really just increases that efficiency of the haircut. Remember, time is money. You might notice here as well I'm already on the back of the head. I think key to this is making sure you are going through your work all the way to the back and even on the other side when you're using cross graduation. At this point, because I've done the other side, there shouldn't be too much to cut off, as you can see. Here I'm just making it a little bit shorter at the top because that's what the clients asked for. At the back, just to add a bit of texture, I'm just point cutting, so that's where I've got the scissors at an angle. You can see here, instead of just cutting that straight, I'm just cutting it with a little bit of angle because I think it just adds a bit more texture and I think it looks a bit better for this type of trim. Once I'm happy with how the back looks, I'll then unclip that triangle section which is connecting the top to the back, and then I'll cut through that as I have done before. You can see I'm making diagonal sections and then cutting straight. I could also do some point cutting afterwards, but I chose not to. Instead, I chose to do this little technique. Not too sure what it's called, but it's being very delicate with the scissors. It adds texture as well. As you can see, it looks quite nice at the back now. Moving swiftly onto the top, so you can see I've made a centre parting using his nose as a reference. This I find quite useful and is a little bit of a top tip of mine. I always found it tricky to start with finding the centre parting, but I realised just using natural features that every single person has, it's quite easy. What I'm then doing, starting with the right hand section, is pulling up a section of hair, gradually working my way from the front to the back. The key to this is pulling the hair up vertically from the head, making sure not to drag it away from its position of growth, and then using a bit of a point cutting technique to add a little bit of texture. Something to note as well is making sure that you're only cutting hair up until your knuckle. This is where you lose a lot of tension, and you can see when I reach the knuckle I stop cutting. This is absolutely critical because otherwise you'll be cutting hair at different lengths. You can see as well, once I've finished with a section of hair, I'll then comb that bit forward and then pick up the next hair. I'm not dragging every single bit that I've cut from the front to the back. I then push it forward and then pick up the next section. I find that is the best way to keep the consistency throughout the haircut. Once I've finished with the right hand section, I'll then brush all the hair forward using my comb. I'll then section another middle parting to start the left hand side. Then I'm just repeating the exact same process on the left hand side. You can start with the left or the right hand side of the head. It literally doesn't matter, this is just the way I did it for Will's hair. Another top tip of mine is making sure you're using the thin end of the comb so you're getting as much tension in the haircut as possible. If the person has a lot thicker hair, you could then pick it up using the wider teeth. However, then you would want to switch to the thinner teeth to make sure you've got that tension. That is absolutely critical again to making sure that the hair is all the same length. Once the top is complete, I'll then brush the hair back using a combination of both my hands and the hair. This is to try and get it into the style that the client wants it. I find this is then useful to see if you're happy with your work, but also to then show your client afterwards to make sure that they're happy with it as well. To start with, I would recommend styling it with the comb, but then you can progress to using your hand. I think this just gives a more natural finish and is more realistic to how they are going to style their hair every morning. You can see he's buzzing, I'm buzzing, it's sitting nicely, and we can move on to the final touches. So what I'm now doing is something that I've learned to do quite recently. I think I learned this off a barber named Sam Rascals. If any of you have seen some of his videos, I would really recommend watching them. But what I'm trying to do here is get rid of those little baby hairs or shorter hairs under the longer hair. As I said, I never used to do this, but a lot of people who were having this type of haircut or this style often complain that it was growing out too quickly because these shorter hairs, which grow faster, were going past the longer hairs and it would just need a top up every 2 weeks. I would recommend being quite careful with that and only do it if you're quite confident, because you don't want to go too high and cut the longer hair. Another finishing touch I like to do is just add a little bit of a fade onto the sides. I think this just gives a bit more of a cleaner look. Once I've nailed the fade on both sides, I'll then cut around the ear with the scissors. You can do this with a clipper, but again, I'm going for a more natural finish, and I think the scissors give that. Obviously, there is a risk here that you could cut his ear, but what I'm doing is using my other finger to move his ear out the way. Please be very careful doing this. I've then drafted in expert opinions, which is his girlfriend, to make sure that it's not too long, make sure she's happy with it. I've then got the 360 mirror out so he can see it. I find this is another good use of this mirror, not only for self trims but also for other people looking at their own haircut once I've finished it. The conclusion was it was a little bit long at the bottom, so I'm just going over it with a bit of scissor over comb, making sure not to take too much off, and finally giving it that bit of shape that it needs to make it pop. And that is just about that. So if you like this video, please let me know and I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, guys.